Mr. Speaker, I rise tonight to deal with the problem that occurred in my recent primary election, one in which, let me say that I was successful despite this problem, but I want to bring it to the attention of our nation tonight. For while I mention it in reference to my own experience in the recent primary election, I am convinced that it constitutes a danger for all America and threatens to rip the fabric of our democracy. I represent the 2nd Congressional District in Illinois. It is not an inner city district. It consists mainly of bungalows, semi-professional and blue-collar workers, 2nd and 3rd generation families there. It is approximately 30% suburban, approximately 30% non-black. It is an industrial district that has housed most of the heavy industry in Illinois: automobile assembly plants, stamping plants, 3 steel mills, at one time 4. And in this campaign, a strange thing occurred. A column was written by a columnist in the Sun-Times, Chicago Sun-Times newspaper, by the name of Vernon Jarrett, that raised questions about who really was my opponent because of what appeared to be a strange tilt in the sources of his campaign funding. I want to share some facts with you here this evening that perhaps could be shared by some others who have been targeted, apparently, as I was in this primary, and unfortunately lost their re-election bids.
What does that mean? The district was challenged in the Supreme Court. And with the assistance of the Anti-Defamation League, the district was dismantled. It generally takes about $250,000 minimum to take a case from filing up to the Supreme Court. And the people who filed the lawsuit to dismantle they challenged my ability to represent the people of that particular district.
Who were these people?
Well, actually, interestingly, there were 5 white citizens, one of whom had been the white male candidate that I defeated in the Democratic primary. And they were aided and abetted by the Anti-Defamation League. And when the case arrived at the Supreme Court, interestingly, on the same day as an environmental case, the Spotted Owl case, the Supreme Court decided that the habitat for the spotted owl should be protected, but that the black voters in that district could have no protection. And so the district was dismantled. Could have no protection. And so the district was dismantled. Could have no protection. And so the district was dismantled.
I want to share some facts with you here this evening that perhaps could be shared by some others who have been targeted, apparently, as I was in this primary, and unfortunately lost their re-election bids. After seeing this column, I began to check the records, and the Federal Election Commission report of my opponent for this year, which was available only for January and February, of course, and began to check the identities of those who had contributed to his campaign. And I want to let you know what I found. It relates to an organization called the American Israel Political Affairs Committee. And so before I begin to give numbers, amounts, let me first familiarize you with the American Israel Political Affairs Committee, because it is not well known beyond Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and your elected representatives. It is indeed a rather shadowy operation. And I want to not just try to describe the American Israel Political Affairs Committee, better known as AIPAC, and I'll refer to it as so from the initials AIPAC, AIPAC. Not to be confused, incidentally, with the term PAC, referring to political action committees. That's a different kind of PAC. Political action committees, as you know, are those organizations under the Federal Election Commission that organize to contribute money to campaigns for federal candidates and others. But AIPAC means the American Israel Political Affairs Committee, not a PAC. Has no right to contribute money to candidates, therefore. But rather than try to describe it myself, I want to just read excerpts to you from newspaper reports that I discovered when I began to pursue this matter, and in the process began to realize that I had been targeted for defeat by AIPAC. First, the Wall Street Journal, June 24th of 1987. An article by John J. Falca, and reads just in part, refers to the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, as one of Washington's most powerful lobbying organizations. And he points out in this article that according to a computer-aided analysis of 1986 Federal Election Commission reports, despite AIPAC's claims of non-involvement in political spending, no fewer than 51 pro-Israel PACs, most of which draw money from Jewish donors. I'm reading a quote from the Wall Street Journal. Jewish donors and operate under obscure sounding names, are operated by AIPAC officials or people who hold seats on AIPAC's two major policy-making bodies. Continuing this article, the analysis shows that 3 of 7 regional chairpersons at AIPAC direct PACs, meaning political action committees now, those who can legally contribute money and do. 3 of 7 regional chairpersons of AIPAC direct PACs, political action committees, and 26 more political action committee chairmen or treasurers sit on AIPAC's 131-member executive committee, which meets 4 times a year and sets overall lobbying strategy. 22 more political action committee leaders hold seats on the second advisory body of AIPAC, the 200-member National Council. And it concludes that while the pro-Israel PACs, that's political action committees, not AIPAC, represent diverse and supposedly bipartisan Jewish communities in almost every major city and region in the country, their spending patterns are remarkably similar. I have to ask you to bear with me as I read from 3 or 4 clippings briefly to lay the groundwork for you to understand this obscure operation. Because however obscure and disguised, if you will bear with me, you will learn what should be of great concern to us all. The next clipping, and I'm going to relate these down the line, is from the Washington Times newspaper, January 13th, 1989. It says, in part, a group of prominent Americans concerned about Washington's diplomatic tilt toward Israel filed a complaint yesterday with the Federal Election Commission charging, in a 100-page complaint, charging that AIPAC has worked so closely, I'm just reading, with legally established PACs to target political candidates on the basis of their positions toward Israel that the PACs, political action committees, are in effect affiliates of the lobby group. That would be illegal. That would be in violation of the federal election laws. It would be in violation of what AIPAC contends are the limits of its own activities. And I continue this same clipping. AIPAC's formidable ability to mobilize congressional support is based not upon an appeal to American national interests, is based not upon an appeal to American national interests, is based not upon an appeal to American national interests.
I have said to people when they ask me if this Capitol crumbled to the ground, the one thing that would remain is our commitment to our aid, and I don't even call it aid, our cooperation with Israel. That's fundamental. Our cooperation with Israel. That's fundamental. Our cooperation with Israel. That's fundamental.
Were I a Jew, I would be a Zionist. My father pointed out to me I did not need to be a Jew to be a Zionist. For I am. Israel is essential to the security of Jews worldwide. I say again, you need not be a Jew to be a Zionist. The fact is that since then I've known every single prime minister, and it's been an honor. Formed strong working relations with each of them. And now, this is my 10th visit. Every chance to return to this great country, where the ancient roots of the Jewish people date back to biblical times, is a blessing. Because the connection between the Israeli people and the American people is bone deep. We invest in each other. We dream together.
A state law that is supposed to be about the Texas economy and foreign relations is now the basis of a lawsuit over free speech. KVUE political reporter Ashley Godot is here now. And Ashley, this is about a complicated topic, Israel.
Yeah, very complicated, Mike. In 2017, the state of Texas passed an anti-BDS or anti-boycott law. It banned state agencies from doing business with companies that boycott Israel. But a speech pathologist in Pflugerville says the state is trying to silence her right to free speech.
May 2017.
Any anti-Israel policy is an anti-Texas policy.
Governor Greg Abbott signs an anti-boycott, divestments, and sanctions bill into law, prohibiting state agencies from doing business with companies that boycott Israel. Fast forward 19 months.
It attacks me personally, it attacks my family.
This is Bahia Amawi. For the last 9 years, she's been an independent contractor with Pflugerville ISD, working as a speech pathologist for young children, specializing in students who speak Arabic. But when the time came to sign her contract this year, she saw this, a new clause as a result of the law stating the contractor doesn't and won't boycott Israel. As an American, Amawi says it violates her right to free speech, and as a woman of Palestinian descent, she says it does more.
I have a lot of family members who are still in occupied territory, suffering from the brutality and the aggression and struggling every day.
She didn't sign and lost her job. Now she's suing the state and Pflugerville ISD.
This law was intended to prevent Americans from exercising their constitutional rights to protest a foreign country. And in this case, it's really absurd that the Texas law is taking a foreign country's side over the side of students who need Bahia's services.
AIPAC's formidable ability to mobilize congressional support is based not upon an appeal to American national interests, now get this, but upon threats by a special interest that has resorted to conspiracy and conclusion, unquote, that's a quote, says Richard Curtis, formerly the chief inspector of the U.S. Information Agency and one of the plaintiffs in this case. The complaint, supported by more than 24 exhibits, this is no longer a quote, this is in the newspaper clipping, the report, demands that the FEC force AIPAC to register as a political action committee and disclose its activities. Such a ruling would hamper the effectiveness of the lobby, which operates behind the scenes to recruit support for Israel, the largest recipient of U.S. aid with $3 billion annually, and to oppose weapons sales to Arab foes of the Jewish state. Now that's from the Washington Times by Isaiah Poole. Just a couple more, because I'll bet that most of you are not familiar with AIPAC nor any of this that I am reading. This is from the Washington Post, November 14th, 1988, an article by Charles R. Babcock. It says, internal AIPAC documents made available to the Washington Post show that the group's top political operative was actively involved with pro-Israel political action committees, PACs, trying to help raise money for several candidates in the 1986 Senate races. A memo from Elizabeth Schreier, then AIPAC's deputy political director, 5 weeks before that election, urged an assistant to call several pro-Israel PACs and tried to get $500 to $1,000 donations for 5 specific Senate candidates. In that memo, Schreier listed 9 pro-Israel PACs and noted that some had not contributed to certain candidates. 4 other documents in 1985, letters from Schreier to individuals in Massachusetts, California, and Hawaii. In them, she offers to provide fundraising ideas and arrange speakers for new pro-Israel PACs, sends a sample solicitation letter and a list of pro-Israel PACs to a fundraiser for her candidate, and volunteers to answer questions about how to start a PAC. AIPAC's major goal, says this article from the Washington Post, is maintaining the level of foreign aid to Israel. AIPAC's major goal, says this article from the Washington Post, is maintaining the level of foreign aid to Israel. AIPAC's major goal, says this article from the Washington Post, is maintaining the level of foreign aid to Israel.
House Republicans, with help from some Democrats, approving more than $14 billion in aid for Israel only, not for Ukraine, as President Biden had requested, nor is there any humanitarian aid for Palestinian civilians caught in the middle of this war. Let's get right to our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce. And so, Mary, what are you learning? What is the White House saying? What's the future of this money, given how they passed this?
Well, David, the House just narrowly passing this $14.3 billion in military aid for Israel. This is money to help replenish the Iron Dome missile defense system and to bulk up munitions. 12 Democrats joining the overwhelming majority on Republicans on this.
I'm going to send to Congress an urgent budget request to fund America's national security needs, to support our critical partners, including Israel and Ukraine. It's a smart investment that's going to pay dividends for American security for generations. Help us keep American troops out of harm's way. The security package I'm sending to Congress and asking Congress to do is an unprecedented commitment to Israel's security that will sharpen Israel's qualitative military edge, which we've committed to. We're going to make sure other hostile actors in the region know that Israel is stronger than ever and prevent this conflict from spreading.
AIPAC's major goal, says this article from the Washington Post, is maintaining the level of foreign aid to Israel, now $3 billion a year, and defeating arms sales to Arab countries. Now, what it's beginning to show you is that the interest, the purpose of AIPAC is to promote a foreign nation, not America's interests. Organization operating within America, composed of Americans, in the interest of a foreign nation, interfering in the internal affairs and the elections of this nation. Let me show you, let me go just a little further now. Here's again from the Washington Post, October 7th, 1988. Let's see what kinds of interference, for what purpose, and who do they attack? Let's watch this. This article written by the same Charles Babcock. It says this, now listen closely. The American Israel Public Affairs Committee, the nation's chief pro-Israel lobby, has become a subject of attention twice in the past week because of reports of partisan involvement or personal attacks in the 1988 political campaign. One case centers on a year-old internal AIPAC staff memo urging that Jewish reporters, and I'm reading from this article, this is not Gus Savage saying this. One case centers on a year-old internal AIPAC staff memo urging that Jewish reporters raise questions about Jesse L. Jackson's sex life and finances. AIPAC, pursuing the interests of a foreign government, beginning to try to develop surreptitious means of hurting, damaging a presidential candidate in this nation. This gets closer and closer, as you would notice, to something un-American. Now, here in a special report, the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs, July 1989, it points out here, and I'm reading again, 70 active pro-Israel political action committees, are those are PACs that can give money to influence elections, outcome elections, spent $3,870,000 in direct contributions in the 1988 elections. And I'm skipping over just reading excerpts. There are several factors that make these pro-Israel PACs unique. The first is their name. Now you might ask, what's in a name? Then if there's nothing in a name, why try to name something in a way as to not reveal its purpose and its function? It continues in this article, Edward Rhoda, whose Sunshine News Service publishes Pax Americana, that's a book, to draw this admission from Robert Golder, president of Delaware Valley PAC. From Robert Golder, president of Delaware Valley PAC. Now that's an innocently sounding name, Delaware Valley PAC. That could be about nature. It could be about the streams or whatever else might attract people to the small state of Delaware. It could be about the headquarters of the many corporations that are located there. But what does Golder, the president of the Delaware Valley PAC, say? Quote from this article, quote, "This PAC is a group of American Jewish people working for a stronger American position on Israel. I don't know that it is necessary for outsiders to know who we are. It's a small group of Jewish fundraisers raising money from mostly Jewish contributors, and we can explain who we are to them," unquote. Robert Golder, president of the Delaware Valley PAC. The article now, I'm no longer quoting Golder, but the article by Richard Curtis continues that if 70 pro-Israel PACs active in 1988 coordinated their giving, and to do that through AIPAC would be illegal, coordinated their giving, internal AIPAC documents instructing employees to contact named PACs and tell them to give designated amounts to named candidates, which have fallen in the hands of both the Washington Post and the TV show 60 Minutes. You may recall of the show when Mike Wallace exposed AIPAC. They indicate that coordination involving at least 20 of the major pro-Israel PACs took place in 1988, and that such coordination makes AIPAC and those PACs into a single PAC, circumventing the law that limits donations to a single candidate. Now, after I've described AIPAC to you, made you a bit more familiar with AIPAC, now let me go back to where we started and relate it to my recent primary. Here's a letter dated February 28, 1990, from a Robert H. Asher, 211 East Chicago Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. Now, I'm going to tell you who, and I'll identify for you this Robert H. Asher later. Let me first read this letter that was mailed by Robert H. Asher. Well, let me just tell you right now, so I won't hold you in suspense. Robert H. Asher was the president of AIPAC. The letter reads, "Gus Savage has one of the worst attendance records in Congress." Well, now, of course, that's untrue. The records of how often you vote in Congress is a matter of public records in print. And though many of you may know that in newspapers and television for the past 8 or 9 years, many times when they just mention my name, they'll say Gus Savage, who has such a poor attendance record. And if I say that it's in print, then they can find out just what that record is, and find out that, and they would discover that record was not poor, except for the few months of bereavement when I, in 1981, lost my wife of 34 years to a very excruciating ailment. Then except for that, nowhere near poor. But yet he says this. And as I said, that you can I'll explain later why it might be interesting to note that the press has been saying this for the past 8 or 9 years, knowing that it was not true, and knowing that you would have perhaps no interest enough to check to find out whether it was true or not, and just accepted it. True or not, and just accepted it. True or not, and just accepted it.
To all my Jewish friends, my Jewish brothers and sisters, stand tall. Stand tall. Do not let this fear, this sadness, this anxiety, and this dread overwhelm you. Draw strength from your family, from your friends, from your ancestors and the worldwide bond that we share that has always put the battery in your back. We're used to being looked at as different because that's what we are. We are different, and that's a good thing. I know that Jews are looked at as weak, but we're stronger than you can imagine. That's why you hurl propaganda that we control all the money, that we control all the money, that we control all the money. We control the media because it's plausible. It's plausible because we're just that good. Smart, compassionate, moral, and strong people. And we need to stand taller than ever against all those sick, dumb, uneducated black tar in their blood who hate Jews because they ain't. You hate us because you ain't us.
I'll explain later why it might be interesting to note that the press has been saying this for the past 8 or 9 years, knowing that it was not true, and knowing that you would have perhaps no interest enough to check to find out whether it was true or not, and just accepted it. And he says that since he is consistently anti-Israel, Gus Savage, anti-Semitic, pro-PLO, pro-Farrakhan, his lack of attendance is probably a good thing. That's a bit scandalous, but let's see what was his purpose of disseminating such falsehoods. If Savage is not defeated this time, he'll be in Congress as long as he wants. Well, I hope he was correct in that regard at least. Then he concludes, please send your check payable to the committee to elect Mel Reynolds in the enclosed envelope. The primary is less than a month away. Sincerely, Robert H. Asher. Wonder why he's so interested in AIPAC in influencing the outcome of a primary election in the 2nd District of Chicago. The main issue in the 2nd District in Chicago is not Israel. It's about jobs, either unemployed steel workers, unemployed automobile workers, jobs, working conditions, wage rates, federal assistance to avoid mortgage foreclosures as a consequence of unemployment resulting from the structural economic changes in our country, not Israel. Why then would he be so concerned about the outcome of that election? Let's see just how concerned he actually is. Now what I'm going to do is where I really wanted, the point I wanted to reach that makes this all relevant. I have here a list of the executive board of AIPAC. The executive board of AIPAC and its national council and officers. That's how I know who Robert Asher is. What I intend to do here now is to take the Federal Election Commission report filed by my then opponent, Mel Reynolds, filed here, his signature for January and February of this year, the only one now, the latest one that's available. Now, I'm making this statement because I want you to conclude or agree with me that we need to strengthen the federal election laws. We need to enforce that which now exists against AIPAC. We need to be concerned about an agency whose main concern is the interest of a foreign government taking advantage of the rights and privileges of American citizenship to influence your Congress. Now, Reynolds had to file this as all candidates do. And incidentally, let me say, when I go to point out to you how much money he raised, you will find during that period, though they say incumbency is protected by our capacity to raise so much money, In that period, I only raised $15,000. But Reynolds raised $51,000, more than 3 times as much. Never held office before in his life. Didn't live in the district until a couple of years ago. What about all of this money? Well, I can tell you something about money. I was doing our break in January, and I took a little time off. I play golf. At least I claim I do. Some of those who play with me deny that. But at least I try, and I enjoy it. Find it relaxing. So there is a great golf course down in the Bahamas called Paradise Island. So I went to Nassau to play golf. And after you finish a round of golf, you go back to the hotel resort, as some of you have done, I hope, and you go outside because there's such a wonderful climate there. And there's outside bar or refreshment stand, maybe a better way of putting it. And you go out and you refresh yourself, and they have entertainment outdoors there by the bar. And in this instance, there's calypso singing, very common in this part of the world. And the fellow was singing a song, a calypso song. I had not heard it before, but I do remember the lyrics because they were so interesting. And they are applicable here. You know, calypso is like the blues to African Americans. It's often they are complaining about personal problems. And in this song, that's what he was complaining about. That according to the lyrics of this song now, this man was complaining about his woman. Not uncharacteristic of calypso song, nor of the blues. Apparently she had come home very late one night. In fact, she had stayed out all night long. And as they say, the sunshine had caught up with her. She said, the song says, indicates that she came in, fell asleep. The man, so concerned and distraught, very poverty-stricken family, started checking to see was she all right. And he noticed her purse, which was usually bare, was just chucked full of something, just bulging, a bulging purse. And he opened the purse, and money just fell out. All kinds of money, he said. And that's what the song said. All kinds of money from all kinds of places. But of course, in a resort like Nassau, people come from all over the world. And as the song goes, he tried to awake her, to ask her, where did you get all of this money? That's the title of the song. And it goes, where did you get, I can't sing, unfortunately. Some people say I don't speak too well either, but let me just talk it. It says, where did you get this money? American money. German money. Japanese money. Jewish money. Where did you get all of this money? That was the question I asked myself when I saw that my opponent had raised so much more money than did I. Where did he get all of that money? Well, fortunately, the FEC report, it requires that anyone who gives you $200 or more, an individual, must be listed by name and address. And any PAC, that's a political action committee, that gives you money must also be listed by name and address, and the name of its treasurer shown. All right. I was a journalist before I was ever elected to office. Journalist for some 20 years, an award-winning journalist. Learned a lot about how to do research, but of course it was not hard to research this. So I took this list and I looked at his individual contributors. Let me give you these figures. Just bear with me, if you please. Now, of that amount that he had raised, 8,250 of it was itemized as individual contributions, meaning from people who gave him $200 or more. Of that $8,250, let's see how much came from where. And to do that, I refer back to this list from AIPAC, now blown up so you can see, list of its executive committee and national council and officers. Want to see how many people who contributed this money, the large sums, also on the executive committee of the national council or as an officer of AIPAC. Called cross-checking, you know. And now let's just go down and let's see. First of all, the contributor is that same Robert Asher. Now, you know, the most an individual can give to a candidate is $1,000. The most that a PAC can give to a candidate, however, is $5,000. Private corporation cannot give money. Unions cannot give money out of union funds. Now, let's just check it. Robert Asher, as I told you, is the president of AIPAC. His address is 51 Oakmont Road, Highland Park, Illinois. That's not in the 2nd District, not even in Chicago. But he's interested in the 2nd District to the tune of $1,000. Let me just read this list. Mary Jane Asher, $1,000, Highland Park, Illinois. Daniel Asher, $1,000, Highland Park, Illinois. Howard David Sterling, Beverly Hills, California, $250. Louis A. Morgan, $500, Highland Park, Illinois. Susan Asher, $1,000, Highland Park, Illinois. On and on. I won't read all to you. But I took these names. The Asher, Robert Adler, $500. Robert Adler. Louis Morgan, Irvin Wine, $500. Took all those names and found that they were all on the executive committee of AIPAC. Not living in Chicago, let alone in the 2nd Congressional District, but board members of AIPAC who were not supposed to try to finance campaigns. Not legally can it, has not the legal authority. And when I added it all up, as you can if you like to check these, because everything I've mentioned here is available to you, AIPAC's list of the FEC report of my opponent, all this is available to you. I added it up, and it showed that of the $8,250 from individual contributors, itemized amount of contributors, 6,750 were from these. In other words, 82%. I'm not saying that he got a few contributors who liked AIPAC or loved Israel or to give him some money. Nothing unusual or odd about that, but not 82% of all of those contributions. For people affiliated with AIPAC, one organization, not in the 2nd District. Primary purpose, concerned about the interests of a foreign nation.
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10. Explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was black. Abraham, born in the city of a black man, called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons, for real, and these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10.